Welcome back to the latest episode of the Jake Bequette Show. I'm your host, Jake Bequette, back here in the house for another great episode this week, and it was a busy news week. First, I want to lead off on a more somber note and acknowledge and express my sincere condolences to the family of Ryan Mallett, a former teammate who tragically died this past week off the Gulf of Mexico. He tragically drowned in the ocean there off the coast of Florida. Heard the news and just it was a wild day hearing from so many teammates, and the reaction has still been pouring in. I've spoken to numerous media outlets here in Arkansas and even nationwide. There was a lot of shock and grief, and rightfully so. I mean, Ryan was only 35 years old. He was a relatively young man. He was a high school coach currently, or he was at Whitehall here in the state of Arkansas, and he'll be missed. You know, as I mentioned, Ryan and I were college and professional teammates. We were teammates for 3 years at the University of Arkansas, and then for about a year and a half after that with the Patriots. He was in the draft class of 2011. I came in 2012. But I go back with Ryan even further. He and I were in the same football class of 2007, the 07 recruiting class. We actually got to know each other back in our sophomore year of high school at the old Houston Nut summer camp. We were both in the tight ends group, believe it or not. You know, Ryan, I think he ran about a 5'6", 40, but even then he could throw the ball a mile. I mean, he could throw the ball 70 yards in the air when he was 15, 16 years old, and for some reason he was playing tight end. But of course, that arm talent, you can't hide that. So he eventually became a very highly touted quarterback. He signed with Michigan out of high school and then transferred into Arkansas and sat out the year 2008, where we were really bad. Bobby Petrino's first season, Ryan was actually the scout team quarterback. And as you could probably guess, he was carving up the first team defense as the scout team quarterback. And so even though 2008 was a rough year, we on the team, we could kind of see that the future was bright, with Ryan leading the show. And he did it for the next two seasons in 2009 and 2010. Especially in 2010, we really had a great team that year. I always think that was probably our best chance to win a national championship. We won 10 games, only lost 3, all to top 5 teams, including the eventual national champs, Auburn with Cam Newton. But it was a great season. Ryan was a tremendously talented passer. As I said, I mean, he had a cannon for an arm. In New England, I mean, I'll tell you another story. I mean, we were... he was the scout team quarterback for the Patriots against the first team defense, as backups are, and he would make 1 or 2 throws every single day in practice, where our defensive coordinator, we'd be watching practice tape as a defense after practice, and he would just tell a cornerback, on one of those couple of passes, he said, "Hey, don't worry, we're not going to see that ball on this Sunday or any Sunday." I mean, Ryan had the most incredible cannon arm I've ever seen, and he came back to Arkansas. I mean, what I told a lot of media outlets this week is, Ryan really loved Arkansas. I mean, he did. I mean, I could see when he transferred in from Michigan, a weight had been lifted from his shoulders, and he was happy to be home. And it's really no surprise to me that he came back and made Arkansas his home when his NFL career ended. He played 7 years in the league and had some success and came back and got into coaching, and he loved the environment of football. He loved people who play football. He loved the coaches. He loved the atmosphere, and it didn't surprise me at all to see him get into coaching and become a high school head coach very quickly. I mean, it's not too often that 35-year-olds make it to become a head coach in at any level, especially at a good high school program. So again, I express my sincere condolences. Just the outpouring of emotion and remembrance all over the state just really kind of shows you what Razorback football, what the game of football means to the state of Arkansas. Mallett was a legend, and the people of Arkansas really respected and admired him for that. So my thoughts and prayers are with his parents and his family and all of his loved ones. And, this week we're especially remembering my old quarterback and fellow team captain, Ryan Mallett. The other big news item this week, moving on, was, of course, the big news that came down today on Thursday, June 29th. That's when I'm recording this. The big news that came down today was from the Supreme Court. And the Supreme Court ruled in a 6-3 decision. All the Republican-appointed justices joined together to hold that affirmative action, race-based preferential admissions processes are now unconstitutional at colleges and universities across the country. And I've got a lot to say on this. It's not going to be an incredibly deep dive, but I do want to give you my initial take because, of course, the conservative media industrial complex came out with their takes, and I'm gonna let you know here first why a lot of those takes are wrong and mistaken, and the fight is not nearly over. The fight, if it's even going to happen, is just beginning. So first of all, let's talk about the ruling. So first of all, my first impression reading, I read the opinion today. My first impression reading the opinion is that any person reading a Supreme Court decision, even if it's a conservative majority, you've got to read. You got to see who's writing it. Who's writing the majority opinion. If it's a Clarence Thomas opinion, that's one thing. If it's a Sam Alito opinion, that's another good thing. But in this case, it was a Chief Justice John Roberts opinion, so that if he wrote it, it's not going to be very strong, and it really wasn't. And there's already the holding built in exceptions to the rule already. So right now, you're seeing a lot of cheerleading on mainstream conservative media and online. And don't get me wrong. I mean, this is a victory. It's not a bad thing that the Supreme Court overturned. The ability of colleges and universities to discriminate on the basis of race as a violation of the 14th Amendment. I'm not saying that holding is bad, but here's the problem, and here's what conservatives and a lot of people fail to understand is that these rulings, these laws, everything that kind of comes down the pike that's good news, these things aren't self-enforcing. Okay, these rulings don't enforce themselves. These laws don't enforce themselves. There has to be enforcement. Okay, there have to be consequences for violating these rulings or consequences for violating these laws, or they're not. They're just a bunch of chopped up trees with words on them. And for now, that's kind of what this is, because even in the ruling itself, it says, you can't discriminate based on race. You can't give minorities preferential treatment in terms of test scores, but you can weight someone's experiences, their life experiences, in terms of essays and that sort of thing. Like diversity statements or impact statements. And, this kind of thing is already going on at colleges and universities. I mean, with the makeup of the court, I know a lot of people who are in college admissions, a lot of people who work in education, and, people who, they know how to finesse these rulings, and they know how to avoid the letter of the law, so to speak, to get the outcome that they want. And of course, make no mistake about it. I mean, the colleges, like Harvard, who was the subject, they were the defendant in this suit that made it to the Supreme Court. They issued a statement today saying, hey, we're still going to use our essay procedure to, make sure that people who have, who overcome certain hardships, wink, wink, have preferential treatment. These things are weighted. So, we'll see how these things go, but really the proof of enforcement is going to be in the follow through. Okay, too many conservatives, people, who consume, mainstream conservative content, and kind of the average Republican voter, they're looking at this and there's, hey, it's a victory. Now let me go get back to, I just want to grill. I want to get back and watch the game. Look, I love to grill. I love to watch the big game. But, you've got to follow these things closely and make sure that these laws and rulings are being enforced. Okay, so what I'll be looking for is if a bunch of red state legislatures follow through with special sessions to come in and ban affirmative action. But as you can probably guess, I'm not exactly optimistic or enthusiastic this will happen. I mean, the case in point is the state of Arkansas. The Arkansas in their legislative session, we've got an 82 to 18 GOP majority in the Arkansas House of Representatives, and in that august body, they easily slapped down a kind of token affirmative action ban that was easily defeated this session in the Arkansas legislature. The Senate passed it, but the Arkansas House voted it down by a crazy majority. It was like 54 to 20 something. So it wasn't even close. Okay, and there were yays, there were nays, there were a whole lot of abstentions because they're all cowards and they don't want to put their name on something. I mean, they knew they were voting the wrong way, but they abstained just so they wouldn't have because most people aren't sharp enough to really read through the record and figure out what votes mean what. And so they try to hide it. But I mean, the proof's in the pudding. I mean, it failed easily. No one, really in the state got behind it. It was kind of a half-hearted measure. I think only 9 states out of 50 have an affirmative action ban. But of course, within those states, there's already mechanisms to get around it. So look, I'm not trying to be Mr. Negative over here, but if you listen to this podcast, I'm always going to speak the truth. If you want to listen to cheerleaders and people talking about Red Wave 2020 fill in the blank, there's other outlets where you can do that. I'm going to shoot you straight. So that's really what is the most likely outcome. What should be happening is you should see a wave of state legislatures pushing this decision further. They should be reading into Clarence Thomas's concurrence. Of course, he filed a concurring opinion that was even more. It was even better, much better than Roberts's majority opinion. Thomas had to join the majority in order to make sure that it would get 5 or 6 votes. But you get the picture. That this is really the situation we find ourselves in. Obviously down the line, maybe this decision could trickle down. You could see, kind of the secondary and tertiary effects of this ruling. They could find their way into, eliminating DEI programs and corporate bureaucracies, HR, the military, but that will take follow through. That will take a movement that actually wants to win. Not a movement that is, making a big time living off of professionally losing. That's why I call the GOP the Washington Generals to the left's Harlem Globetrotters. We are the Washington Generals. The GOP, they are professional losers. So we'll see what happens. But I want everyone to hear the truth about this decision. Yes, it is objectively a good thing. But the devil is always in the details. It's always going to be in the follow through. Right now our movement doesn't really have the political will to enforce anything. Obviously we don't have the White House. I think it's very unlikely that a Republican will be occupying the White House after 2024. But even if they did, does that person have the political will, to do what someone like Eisenhower or Kennedy did? When certain local populations did not want to enforce Supreme Court rulings, Eisenhower and Kennedy set the precedent that you send in federal troops and to enforce it at bayonet point. Does the right have the political will to do that? I think the answer to that question. So we'll see. I'm not trying to blackpill anyone. I'm just always going to shoot you straight. So really, that's the big newsworthy item this week. And if you want to really win on these issues, I don't want to be the guy who's always, saying, hey, where things are going wrong. I want to be constructive. So what does victory actually look like? Hat tip to, someone who I think is an outstanding thinker and scholar on this, Orrin McIntyre. What does victory look like? It means your enemies are fired. It means your friends are hired. It means money, state money flows to your patronage network. And then number 4, it means that HR espouses your values. They're pushing your values. So unless those four conditions are met politically, enemies fired, friends hired, HR actively pushing your values, and state money flowing, government money, taxpayer money flowing into your patronage network. Unless those four conditions are met, then that's not a real victory. It's a hollow victory. And as of right now, this Supreme Court ruling, it's a victory, but it's a hollow victory. I'm not interested in cheerleading. I'm not interested in pumping up the crowd. So much of conservative media right now is really just the analogy I like to use is the right, the people, middle America is kind of like a terminally ill patient in hospice care, and really I think most of conservative media, the conservative media industrial complex, most of that really is it's like end of life care, for a terminally ill patient. You make them, you keep them comfortable, you feed them sweets and ice cream, you fluff their pillows, you talk about the good old days. That's what conservative media really is. We're looking at kind of a dying patient here in the U.S. of A. And, instead of really fighting back with chemotherapy and aggressive treatments and, taking the initiative and trying to experiment and move the needle and, try to do everything humanly possible to save this patient. Most of GOP politics and conservative media is just, keep the patient comfortable, end of life care, milk as much money out of this dead guy as you possibly can, this dying guy as you possibly can, and then, move on to the next dead body. So that's not what I'm doing here. I'm always going to give constructive criticism. I'm always going to give the way forward. And, really, if you need the way forward here, it's just this basic framework. Enemies fired, friends hired, money flowing into your patronage network, and corporate HR, government HR, the bureaucracy is actively pushing your propaganda, your values on the population. So until those terms are met, we haven't had victory, and we'll see next week what the big news is. Until then, this is the Jake Bequette Show, and we'll see you next time.